Hello, this is Mr. Turek, and today we're just going to go over some Photoshop basics. To open Photoshop, it's real easy. You're going to go to your Start menu in the lower left-hand corner, and you're just going to scroll down to Adobe Photoshop, and you're going to click on that to open it. It's probably going to take a while to load. While it is loading, you're going to see this screen.
The loading screen, or the splash page.
Alright, when Photoshop opens, you're going to see this screen. This is kind of their brand new opening screen. And from here you can create a new document, or you can go up to the File menu and create a new document. But I kind of like using this brand new screen. So click Create New. And you're going to see the new document dialog box pop up. A dialog box is any of these boxes that are separate windows from the main window. In here you can enter the file name if you want it to. And you should always do your last name, your first name, and then the project title. And for this we're going to call it Workspace. We're going to call it version 1 because this is the first version of this. Use your last name and your first name. And if you actually share a name with somebody else in the class, like I have a pretty common name, my first name's Joe. I might want to include my middle name just to differentiate me from the other Joes in the class. So I'm going to add James, which is my middle name. And then you're going to see all this stuff. And this is the size of your document. So right now it's set to width 1920 pixels, and there's these presets over here. We're actually going to just click on this preset that's already set for 11 by 8.5 inches at 300 pixels per inch. You're going to click on that, and you're going to see all this information change. You can click in these little boxes to manually change that. Like if I wanted 12 inches, I could just click 12 on my keyboard. I want to keep it 11. You can change the dimension measurement here. You can also change the orientation, and you can change the resolution. And the resolution is simply, again, how many pixels there are per inch. This is going to be important that you understand this distinction, because every time you make an image, how many pixels are contained within each inch is going to determine how it prints, and it's going to determine how much information is in each file. So it's going to determine how the file looks at certain distances. You want a lot of pixels per inch so that when it prints it looks good, and when you're working on it you have enough pixels to work with. The common resolution for this class is going to be 150 to 300 pixels per inch. So keep that in mind. When you have your name and the dimensions correct, click Create. That's going to create a blank file. And here are the parts of the workspace that you're going to need to label for this assignment. This is your canvas or your workspace. It's sometimes just called the image, or the area where the pixels are. It's pretty much where you're going to look at everything. It's white now because it's a blank document, but if you open a photo, your photo is going to be right here in this workspace. Each workspace is a window in of itself. So if I click on this window, I can move it around, I can resize it, or I can snap it back into the main workspace. Anytime you snap any of these windows or panels back into the workspace, you're going to see that blue highlight, and it'll snap back into place. On the right, you have your panels. The basic workspace when you open Photoshop is set to Essentials. And Essentials just includes some pretty basic panels. Your Adjustments panel, your Layers panel. Again, you can resize these. You can click on, drag them to kind of bring them out. You can, again, pop them back in. On the left-hand side is your toolbox. Your toolbox is where all your tools are. You're going to need to label and understand what each of these tools does. By the end of your time spent working in Photoshop, you're going to have a basic familiarity with most of these tools. You're not going to understand all of them though, because the depth of each of these tools is pretty extensive, and some tools we're not going to cover at all, like the history brush tool. It's a useful tool, but for our purposes right now, you really don't need to understand what it does. On the top, you see this little bar right here. This is the options bar. Depending on what tool you have, that changes. Each tool has a different set of options available in this options bar. When I talk about the options bar, this is the bar I mean, right here. The very top bar with the words, this is your menu bar. And the menus are going to have lots of commands in them. These commands have shortcuts or hotkeys, and so do your tools. When you hover over a tool, you're going to see that each tool has its own hotkey. For the move tool, it's V. For select all, it's Ctrl+A. So, menu bar, options bar, workspace is the entire thing, actually. The workspace is the entire thing. This is your canvas, your toolbox, and your panels. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a screenshot of your workspace and we're going to save it inside of this 8.5 by 11 inch workspace canvas right here that we've made. To take a screenshot of your entire screen, you're actually going to go to your keyboard, and there's a button in the upper right hand corner of your keyboard called Print Screen. You're going to see it next to the Insert key and the Delete key and the Numlock key. It might be near F12, but what you need to do is you need to hit Print Screen. What that's going to do is that's going to take an entire screenshot of your desktop. And this is useful for two reasons. One, we're going to use it to learn how the workspace is organized, and you're going to label the parts of your workspace. And two, if you ever have a problem in Photoshop, like let's say you click on a menu or you're not sure what something is, you can use this button to like take a picture of your desktop and then kind of show me that picture later and say, look, when I do this, this is what happens. And it can kind of serve as proof for technical issues. A lot of IT people are going to ask you for screenshots sometimes when you're having a really, really specific problem. Once you hit Print Screen, you're going to go to Edit and Paste. Or you can hit Ctrl+V on your keyboard. That's going to place your image in the middle of your document. And the reason it's so small right now is because the resolution of your screen is actually lower than the resolution of your document. You set your document to 300 pixels per inch, and your screen is actually around 72 pixels per inch. Any image on the internet is around 72 pixels per inch. That's sufficient for viewing stuff on screens, but it's not sufficient for print. Like if you were to print this image, it would look kind of grainy and nasty. So when you paste an image into here and you have the Move tool active, by default, the Show Transform controls is clicked on. Only thing that means is that there is these little transform handles around your image. Okay? One thing you want to avoid when using the transform controls is clicking and dragging on your corners all willy-nilly. This can really severely distort your image. Please, please, please do not do this. If I see you do this with an image of any kind, unless it is expressly stated that you can distort images this way, I will tell you to replace the image and resize it correctly. This is an amateur move, and this is highly unprofessional. And if anybody else sees you do this, they're going to be really, really mad at you in the profession. So just make sure you don't do this. If you do mess up and happen to do this, hit Ctrl+Z, and that'll snap your image back to its previous state. If you do it twice, and you hit Ctrl+Z. You only go back one step. Your history panel should be this little panel right here. You can go back further steps on this if you want. Or you can hit Ctrl+Alt+Z to go back further steps. If that doesn't work, usually on a transform command like this, you can just hit cancel. Canceling your transformation reverts the original placed image back to its original state. When you transform images, you want to hold down the Shift key. Holding down the Shift key and clicking and dragging without letting go of the Shift key, make sure that your image stays in its correct proportions whenever you resize it. The proportions are determined by the height and the width. So, if you want to control that manually without having to think about the Shift key, just click this icon right here to maintain your aspect ratio. Now when you stretch it, you ought to be able to do it without having to hold down the Shift key. This is something that's not always available as an option, so it's always good to get in the habit of holding down the Shift key when you resize images. And keep in mind, when you do this on either side, it ignores that. So, make sure you hold down the Shift key and drag from the corners. When you have your image resized larger, hit the check mark at the top to confirm your transformation. Alright, when you're ready to save your file, you should already have a file name for it, but often when you save for the first time, it will ask you for a name for your file. We're going to go File, Save As, and the Save As dialog box is going to open up. In the file name box down here, you can enter your file name. In the Save As type box, you can change what kind of file that you're going to save it as. The default is a PSD. A PSD is a Photoshop document. This is the most space-intensive and complex file format that you can save a file as. A Photoshop document also preserves all of your layer information and a bunch of other, extremely Photoshop-specific information. You need to save your Photoshop files that are really complex files. If you're going to work on a file for, 5-6 days, save it as a Photoshop file. But for our purposes, you really only need to save it as a JPEG because you're not going to do anything else to this file. So we're going to switch our file type to JPEG. And then we're going to click Save to save it. Now, before you do that, make sure you know where you're saving. I should have done that before telling you to click Save. I'm going to save my file in digital photography. And I'm going to save it in Intro Projects. And I'm going to save it in Photoshop Workspace. Awesome. So, now that I know where my file is going to be saved, I can click Save. After you click Save, you're going to have this JPEG options box open up. Leave the quality at maximum and leave it at progressive, and never worry about these settings ever again, and click OK. Alright, so we saved a JPEG of this image of the entire workspace. But now we're going to save an image that's just the toolbox using a different screen capture tool. So we're going to go to File, New, and we're going to name it Turek, Joe, James, Workspace, Toolbox. And this time we're going to save it as 8.5 by 11 inches. And we're going to save it with 300 resolution. So we're going to click Create. And that's going to give us this portrait style workspace. And then we're going to use a different kind of screen capture tool. So go down to the Start menu. And scroll down kind of to the bottom. To Windows Accessories. If you click on Windows Accessories, you're going to notice there's a long list of these little utilities that nobody really uses that much, but they're actually quite helpful. And the one we're going to use is called the snipping tool. So click on the snipping tool. And the snipping tool is actually this little box right here, and it allows you to take a very specific screen grab. So if you want to just like highlight one part of your screen for, you know, a screen capture, you can use the snipping tool. So it's already in the mode we want it in, which is rectangle, and we're just going to click on new to do a new snip. And the screen is grayed out because we haven't actually started the snip, but when you click and drag with this tool, you can make a selection of your screen. So I'm just going to select the toolbox here by clicking and dragging. And now I have this perfect image of the toolbox. And I'm going to save this file, save as, capture toolbox. I'm going to pick a location from my file. Somewhere where I know it is. And I'm actually going to save it in the Photoshop Workspace folder with my other file, the Workspace file. I'm going to click Save. And then I'm going to X out of the snipping toolbox. And when you have a Photoshop document open, when you actually want to place another file inside of it, you're going to use a command called Place Embed. So you're going to go to File, then Place Embedded. That's going to open the Place Embedded menu, or dialog box, sorry. And right now it's actually in the folder I need it to be, but normally you would have to navigate to the folder you want to be in. And then from here you can pick image files and you can place them. So we're actually going to place this capture toolbox file we just made into our document. So click on your capture toolbox file, and then click place, and that's going to place our file in the image. Now when you do a placement like this, it's going to have the same bounding box that your previous paste had. Remember, when you're resizing files, hold down the Shift key and click and drag to make sure you don't distort an image. I'm actually going to make it a little bit bigger like that and move it around. And then I'm going to go up to the check mark at the top of the screen in the options bar, and I'm going to click the check mark to commit my transformation. Alright, so this is all we really need right now. You're going to save this image as a JPEG by going File, Save As. Make sure you enter a name if you haven't already. Under the Save As type, click and select JPEG. Make sure you're in the folder where you want to save it, and click Save. And then click OK when the JPEG options box opens. So for those of you who actually know a little bit about Photoshop and actually want to mess around with it a bit more, I'm going to allow you to do that in Photoshop. You can also use OneNote. First, I'm going to show you how to label stuff in Photoshop. There's a couple ways you could do it. You could use the Type tool. Type tool is pretty straightforward. Just click on the Type tool. Click next to the tool you want to label. Make sure you change the font to a legible font, something simple, and make sure the size is, a reasonable size up in the options bar. And then just type out the name of the tool. This is the Move tool. Make sure you type out the hotkey for that tool. So the Move tool, when you press the V key on the keyboard, you switch to the Move tool. After you're done typing that out, just click the check mark, and there you go. You've just labeled one of your tools that you have to label. For tools that are inside of a tool group, like the Artboard tool, I'm not as worried about those right now as I will be later. So just make sure you label the main tool. If you're working in OneNote to label your images, it's really, really easy. Open OneNote, and then just go to Insert, Pictures, and then from file. And then locate your image that you want to work with. And again, you're going to label the workspace, and you're going to label the workspace toolbox files that you created in Photoshop. You can also use your capture file as well, because OneNote's pretty flexible, but it's totally up to you what you do. Click on Workspace, click Open, and you're going to get a nice, beautiful Workspace file. And on top of this, you can basically click anywhere. You can draw, you can do pretty much anything. Labeling your files should be pretty easy. If you want to draw, you can just click and drag. I'm going to go to text, click where you want it. Canvas. Pretty easy.